Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 8. In this chapter, we are going to actually talk about tables and forms. So, some of the things that maybe you might want to learn would be how to define table elements, and we are going to talk about what is table and the use of it. Then we are going to talk about some of the steps that is being used to plan, design, and code a table. Also, we are going to create, of course, rows and also insert a table caption. Also, we are going to learn about styling our table for tablet and as well as desktop viewports. And we will also talk about the forms and how to use them, basically. Also, we'll talk about the use of the form and the input elements. We will also talk about how to create text input controls, how to create the labels, and as well as checkboxes. Also, we talk about the selection menu. That's another item that we might use in our form. And also, we can talk about the multiple options that can have on our form. We use the text area element. Also, we can create a submit button and the reset button. So before we get into it, I just want to describe to you, like sometimes it might be hard to organize your content. So sometimes the best way is to organize it into categories. And the best way to do that is maybe use a table format. A table actually can present some related information in terms of rows and columns. And sometimes, the table can be used with having some kind of a column headings or maybe row headings to identify those categories that you are defining. Also, sometimes table is important when you need to provide a lot of content into a kind of a compact form. Another use of form is basically a lot of businesses use form to collect information about their customer. You have probably filled out a lot of forms online already. So the common information to collect would include the first names, maybe last name, address, their phone numbers and stuff, and then they use that to keep it in a back end in a database. So website can provide forms so that the visitor can create an account, maybe they can register for an event or even maybe purchase something. They have to fill out this form, these informations. So in this chapter, we are going to actually learn about how to create a form and as well as table. So in brief, table compares data or outline a detailed topic in a compacted format. Also, as we mentioned, it consists of row, columns, and cells. So there are three elements into table form: rows, columns, and cell. So what is a row? Basically, a row is a horizontal line of information, and a column is a vertical line of information. Also, we have a cell. A cell is the intersection of the row and the column, and it can usually contain some sort of a data in there. There are two types of cells. One of them could be a heading cell, which can display text or bold and center aligned material, and then a data cell, which can display normal left aligned text and contains some information that is appropriate for the column and row. So this figure is actually showing you the example of these type of three elements. So we have our column here, we have our row here, and then we have our cell. This three kind of elements would form tables. So this table lists the HTML element that we can use to create a table. So of course you start a table with the table element, and then you close that with the table element. And then you have TR element to show the table row within a table. And then you have TH, which shows the table header cell. And then you have the TD, which stands for table data. Also, you could have table caption, and maybe you will have TH, the table header area, or maybe T-body, the body area of your table, and then the T-footer, the footer area of your table. So these are some of the common elements that maybe you can use in order to create your table in HTML. So as we mentioned, to create our table on a web page, we start with the table. And we end that tag with the table tag as well to end our table. And then, so if we want to have each row, we put the TR in there. So, and then inside it, the TD will have the data inside that. So also there are other things that we can add to our table, such as table borders, also headers, and as well as captions. So in addition to having a column and rows, table can also include borders, headers, and caption. So the table border is the line that defines the perimeter of your table. You can display the table border using a style rule when we are defining in a style sheet. A table header is also a heading cell which is formatted with bold center text that can indicate the purpose of that row or that column. Headers are normally used to identify row or column content. So define a table header, we start with a word th tag and end it with a th tag. We also have table caption, which is describing the text that serves as a title or identifies the table's purpose. The table caption text appears above the table and it spans its length and is centered aligned by the default as well. Define a table caption with the starting point of caption tag and ending it as well with the caption tag. When using a table caption, insert it after the starting table tag. A table can have only one caption. So tables can include headers and captions individually or as well as in combination. So this figure actually shows you a table that is created with this code. So the table, if you look at this on page 381, or you can see it here actually. So let's look at the code here. So here I just want to show you, before we get into the code, we have the table caption, we have the header, which are centered and bolded, and we have the table border, which you can define in your style sheet. So let's look at this code for a minute. So we start with the table tag, then we use the caption. The college course recommendation by semester could be a caption. And then we are going to have the rows. We start with TR and then the header of each row. Maybe semester 1, semester 2, semester 3, semester 4. So that's why we have 4 TH here. And then the second one is, the second row will have different fields in there. So this is the data. It's not a header anymore. So that's why we are using TD. English 1, English 2, English 3, or Spanish 3, or whatever. And then we close that row. And then we start another row. And then again, we have different content in there. Maybe now we want to use college algebra, maybe, or trigonometry or calculus. And then we are going to have another row. So we are going to have 4 different rows. And again, we use the TD because it's not header, it's the data. And then we put our content in it. And then we close our TR, and then we have to close our table tag. So this is actually showing you the result would be like this. So you have 4 rows here. One of them is the header, the TH. The other ones you use as a TD in there. And also you use the table caption to show this at the top of it. Pretty simple. But it is very useful to format our page like this sometimes. Now let's talk about the uses of the table. Using table for a web design was normally very popular in the late 90s. But sometimes a lot of people misuse the table elements. So basically, the tables are meant to display data in row and columns. And you shouldn't actually use it to design a layout for a web page. But before that, like at the beginning, when, the HTML kind of got started, people were using this to format the layout of their web page. So before you add a table, you should first determine if it's necessary on your web page or not. So sometimes you can see it could help you to organize information. So maybe it's easier for the user to read it. Then you can say, okay, maybe we can have a table in there. So also, as I said, it could actually display a structured, organized list of information. So it is useful if the web page needs to display those structured lists of information. In order to create an effective table, we need to do planning. So planning is very important if we want to use the table effectively. So before we write any kind of a HTML code, we can sketch the table on a paper or maybe an electronic document to actually show how many rows and columns we need to create. And whether we need to have headers or caption or something like that, that would be good to have it. Also, when we are planning it, we need to plan it for a responsive web design. So we need to give a careful consideration to the mobile viewport because of the screen size of that mobile devices, which is much smaller than a tablet or a desktop viewport. So this example here, in here we are adding a table element to the classes page. So what we are doing here, actually we are starting the div tag for the desktop, and then we are starting the table tag. This is comments. As you remember, sometimes we want to use a comment for other web designer to be able to understand what we did. And then we have, of course, our caption here. And then we are going to put our row tag. And then the elements that we are going to have in our row tag. And if we need to have a header, we are going to use the th. The next thing that we are going to talk about, we are going to actually talk about styling the table element. So after we create a table, we can style it by adding new style rules to the style sheet. So if you want to give some style to your table, you need to add it to the style sheet for your website. So you can actually specify rules for each table element. So this table gives you common CSS table properties and also some of the examples for style tables that you can use. So some of the property could be background color, maybe your border, the height of it, the margin element to it, maybe the width, text alignment. So you can actually put all of this into your style sheet. So there are other things that maybe when you are styling your table, you might actually take a look at it. One of them would be about the bordering. So looking at the separate border versus collapse border. So it is important to know when to use what kind of a border. So the collapse border, we use this collapse border when we want to consolidate borders. So if we want to consolidate borders, we can use the collapse border. And then if we could actually border collapse property with the value of collapse. So this type of border is called basically the collapse table. And then another one is basically the separated border. So when a border is applied to the table element, by default, each cell has its own border. And making the table appear to use double lines between each table data and cell. So in here, this is an example of how we are going to actually use the style in the style sheet. So basically in our table, these are some of the style rules that we are applying here. So remember, you can get this from the table 8.2, the common CSS table properties. So in here, we kind of styled, we applied the style to the border, the margin, the width, the left margin, right margin, and all that. So in this example here, you can see that you have a table border. You have the table centered on the page. And then you have the caption here. And then the table width is 100% within the main element. So you can actually follow on page 391 to create your table, something like that. And in this kind of a diagram, we can see that, again, we have a comment style for caption element. And then we have our caption. So then again, we have a style rule for that caption. So remember, in here, you have this kind of a caption group fitness class schedule. You need to apply some style rule to it. That's what you are doing here. The font size, the font weight, the padding button, and all that. And then now you want to close that, and you want to close the tablet media query closing braces as well. So this is basically, you apply the formatting to it, it becomes like this. And in here, again, you are putting a comment style for table element, and then you are defining some style rule for the table element. You know, like the background color of it. And in here, again, you are defining some style rule for the caption. You're defining some color element for the caption. And this is what you can see. So this is the font color that you applied for the caption. And this is the background color that you applied for this, when you apply the background color for your table. So this example, kind of, when you make some changes, becomes like this. So you change the background color, and then you change the color of your caption as well. This is it for this part. In the next part, we are actually going to talk about creating web page forms.